The Fourth and Fifth Amendment are the topic of today's show because all the political parties have something to say about, well, most of them. It's time for some Straight Talk Texas. I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is The Bunker Bob Show. Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another edition of the Bunker Bob Show. It is great to have you conservatives, conversationalists from across the fruited plain of the great state of Texas. Glad to have you back to talk about the Constitution and how the platforms differ on their views. Now, there's 4 constitutional amendments that each of the political platforms focus on, and that's the First, Second, Fourth, and Fifth. Now, the 2 preceding shows dealt with the First and Second Amendment, respectively. And today, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the Fourth and Fifth Amendments of the Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights, and part of the Bill of Rights. And so these are very important, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But one of the interesting things is the Fourth Amendment, because this is an important focus of the political platforms, but it's an important right for citizens, which is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be searched. Now, what is important to know about this is that when it comes to the Constitution and when it comes to the political parties, all but one speak to the Fourth Amendment. And that, of course, is the Democrat Party. Can you wonder why? Do you wonder why that the only party not to talk about it on either the national or state platform is the Democrats? Well, it's a very simple answer to that. In fact, previous platforms have had a focus on the Fourth Amendment, but somehow when 2022 came around, that's not the case. When President Trump was in office, somehow they took that out, and it was the precursor to what we saw in Mar-a-Lago, where they swooped in, they raided President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, and his own attorneys were not given a detailed list of what it was they were looking for. Now, the Supreme Court upheld the FBI's raid, so I'm not challenging necessarily the right of the FBI. I am simply saying it makes me nervous. It should make most conservatives in America, and it should really make most Americans nervous that the FBI can conduct a raid like this on the former President of the United States and be upheld by the Supreme Court. It is very, very concerning. So as not to risk being thrown off of YouTube and being put in YouTube jail, I'm simply going to say that this is an important right that from unreasonable searches and seizures, and that the details of any search and seizure should be clearly established in the warrant. And from what I understand and from what I have seen, that was not the case when it came to Mar-a-Lago. Now, I understand that there are those who argue it was. I'm simply saying it didn't look like that to me and to a lot of other people. But that is the fact, and so so I'm going to move on. I'm just going to plead the Fifth. how about that? I'll move on to the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, because this is the one really that really, I guess, focuses a lot of attention, and we hear about the Fifth Amendment a lot. Now, I'm going to break this down into pieces. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Now, just so you know, none of the platforms speak to this portion of the Fifth Amendment, but I thought it was important to at least highlight all of the Fifth Amendment. Now, the next portion is, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, also known as double jeopardy. If you are accused of a criminal offense, a capital offense, especially murder, for instance, if you are found not guilty, you cannot be retried. Again, like before, none of the platforms speak to the issue of double jeopardy in the Fifth Amendment. However, nor shall any person be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. In other words, I plead the Fifth is what we hear a lot, and that is where I don't have to speak if a police officer comes to my home and asks me questions. And anything I say could be used against me. I have the right not to say anything. Now, I have learned over time in talking with different attorneys and district attorneys and judges. I've run several campaigns. I've learned that the worst thing that anyone can ever do is to speak to the police, especially if you are a subject or the focus of an investigation, because it's not just the fact that even if you're innocent, the problem comes in is if you're innocent, other things can come in that make you look guilty, and if you were to speak, it could really it could basically backfire on you. So when we look at this, when a criminal defense pleads the Fifth, jurors are not allowed to take the refusal to testify into consideration when deciding whether a defendant is guilty. And in Ohio versus Reiner, the U.S. Supreme Court held that a witness may have a reasonable fear of prosecution and yet be innocent of any wrongdoing. The Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination serves to protect the innocent who otherwise might be ensnared by ambiguous circumstances. And this is something that actually we saw occur in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. If you followed that trial, you saw the prosecution violate the rules of the Fifth Amendment. And here is the admonition from the judge in that trial.
I was astonished when you began your examination by commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. That's basic law. It's been basic law in this country for 40 years, 50 years. I have no idea why you would do something like that. And it gives, well, I'll leave it at that. So I don't know what you're up to.
Yeah, and so the judge in that instance really highlighted, I'm not sure what he meant by 40 or 50 years. It's been a lot longer than that. It's been since the inception of the Bill of Rights. And it really speaks to the right of an individual. And what this prosecutor was trying to do was make Kyle Rittenhouse look guilty because he was asserting his Fifth Amendment right not to speak, which he really shouldn't have. If you ever watch the first 48, that's the one thing I think that anyone who has ever watched that show comes away with. It's amazing how oftentimes those who are accused of a crime talk to the police, and those who don't end up I guess, in a better position legally because they don't have to, because they're not incriminating themselves. It is interesting, though, that D.A. Binger, the district attorney, the prosecutor in that case, actually ran for district attorney in 2016 as, guess what, no surprise, a Democrat. So when it comes to our rights, I would argue that those on the right are going to be far more focused on your rights than those on the left. Unless, of course, you agree with them. If you're part of their mindset, their political philosophy of leftist ideology, well, then they'll help protect you. It's kind of like when with all the riots that went on, the Black Lives Matter riots, Antifa, that we're talking about millions and millions of dollars worth of public and private property destroyed, people killed during these riots. And what did Democrats do? They came out to try and help free these people from jail because they since they agree with them, they're going to get them out of jail even though they violated the law. That's basically the Fifth Amendment, why the Fifth Amendment is so important. But again, Fifth Amendment is not something that any of the platforms really talk about at all. And so, but when it comes to this part of the Fifth Amendment, this is where we see all of the traction. Nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So let's look at the platforms and how they speak to these issues. The Green Party platform insists that every property right has an implied responsibility to provide for the common good of the people, places, and the planet. In other words, the Green Party does not recognize private property as private property. It is part of the public domain. And the Green Party believes in a heavy top-down government. Remember, we talked about this in the previous shows. And they believe in a utopian society. And so they believe that government is best able to control and prevent bad things from happening. And so their focus is on usurping the right of the private property owner if you don't adhere to their standards of politics. The state platform makes no reference to the Fifth Amendment when it comes to the Green Party. Now, the Democrat National Platform makes no reference to the Fifth Amendment. However, the Texas Democrat Platform focuses on the preservation of rural communities, private property rights. And while they want a state rail plan, they do not want it infringing upon private property rights. Hence, what they're talking about is the issue of eminent domain, which is really where we're going to see a lot of the focus occur in the political platforms as we move forward. So eminent domain is a key topic, and I will say this, that private property rights are at the top of the priorities for libertarians who oppose all attempts by government to abridge the freedom of the right to property and oppose all government interference with those rights, like eminent domain. The Libertarian National Platform asserts that the only legitimate use of force is in defense of individual rights, including justly acquired property against aggression. Libertarians also believe the private property owners should have no limits to the presence of personal defense weapons on their property, as do Republicans. They believe that the only proper role of government is to protect private property rights. Now, obviously, libertarians oppose eminent domain among other violations of the Fifth Amendment, which are an abridgment of fundamental rights, as do Republicans, as you'll see. Now, the Libertarian State Platform amplifies the national, where individuals' inherent right on property stands at the forefront. What's interesting here is that for Democrats, all throughout both the national and state platform, there is a focus on private property. But it is not in protecting private property rights, it is admonishing those who have it. In other words, they focus on the fact that having a house, having private property is a fundamental right that should be guaranteed to every American. They believe government should give everyone a house. Everyone should have the right to a house. Doesn't matter if someone doesn't know how to take care of it, they should have that right. Libertarians and Republicans, on the other hand, believe that everyone should have the right to have a house. There's no dispute there, but it only if you pay for it, and only if you acquire that through legal means. You can't just take private property away, or you can't have the government just giving private property away because we want to make sure everyone has some private property. I mean, this is. Are you sensing where Democrats draw their philosophy from? Again, I go back to worldview. It's a naturalistic worldview, and again, somewhat of this rainbows and unicorn idea that if everyone has a house, well, then everything will be great. And the fact of the matter is that's just not true. In fact, oftentimes when you see the government stepping in to provide nicer homes or nicer facilities, if you will, those facilities end up being ransacked, and they end up being torn apart because those who, whenever you're given something, you don't value it as much as when you have to purchase it yourself. When you purchase something, you take care of it. And that's what we see. So the idea is just backward when you talk about political philosophies and their view of what government should do. Now, libertarians believe that there should be no limitation by regulation, ordinance, or authority on private property. They believe in the elimination of civil asset forfeiture, which allows unjust seizure of property from accused without due process. And libertarians oppose any legislation that restricts an individual's ownership and use of property. Like the national platform, the state platform believes that the only legitimate purpose of government is to protect our rights and property. Like libertarians, Republicans have a lot to say and amplify about the Fifth Amendment regarding private property rights as well. The framers of our government knew from history and experience that when private property is not secure, freedom is at risk. That is why the Fifth Amendment declares that private property may not be taken for public use without just compensation. The Republican National Platform highlights the Supreme Court's Kelo decision, which undermines this safeguard by allowing local governments to seize a person's home or land not only for vital public use, but also for public purpose, quote unquote, which thus allowed the government to seize it for transfer to private developers or other private entities. Republicans call on any state legislatures that have not already done so to nullify the impact of Kelo within their jurisdiction by legislation or state constitutional amendments declaring that private property may be taken only for true public use, and join House Republicans in supporting the Private Property Rights Protection Act. Now, that was back in 2016 because the Republican National Platform is actually adopted from 2016 because of the COVID pandemic. Our national party did not have a true convention. We were the only party that did not have a platform committee that met, and so instead we had to. I was a national Trump delegate, and I was forced to to give a proxy over to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who basically ratified the platform from 2016. Needless to say, I'm not real happy about that, but it is what it is. All the other political parties, from Greens, Democrats, and Libertarians, they all updated their national platform. So it's a bit of a sore spot for me. Like the Texas Libertarian platform, Texas Republicans, by the way, which did update it in 2022, in this last June, Republicans included 5 separate planks that amplify Fifth Amendment protections that Democrats infringe upon. This includes environmentalism that obstructs legitimate business interest and private property use, a call to abolish civil asset forfeitures, the right of landowners and homeowners to approve or reject by vote annexation, an emphasis that property ownership must not be abridged nor denied by government, and the use of eminent domain must exclude the seizure of private property for private economic development or increased tax revenue. So this is a clear distinction, obviously. These constitutional amendments are a clear distinction in the differences between parties, and as you see, the Republicans and the Libertarians are aligned, very closely aligned to one another when it comes to the Fourth and especially the Fifth Amendment of private property rights. So if you're wondering, if you're out there and you're contemplating, well, should I be a Republican or a Libertarian? Because Libertarians, they sure make some good points on constitutional issues, which I would agree with in some respects, with big exceptions, being that of life, protecting innocent human life. But also, there's other issues that are at play, much bigger issues. Obviously, Libertarians are in favor and support these gender-affirming nonsense that we have going on, because we believe that somehow it's okay for a 12-year-old to go through gender modification, and that there's no moral basis for it, since Libertarians don't have, they're not led by and are not driven by a moral compass. It is more of a natural humanist point of view, and giving people the right to do whatever they want, even if they argue, well, as long as it doesn't harm someone. But a 12-year-old, I'm sorry, I will have to say, is not old enough to make a decision like a life-altering decision like that. Not so, say, Libertarians. In fact, Libertarians just remain mute on the issue, and so that is kind of the issue, and that's basically it for the focus on the Constitution. So I hope that's been helpful. We're going to be looking at other issues in the platforms to compare them with, compare them to: education, health and human services, transportation, taxation, those kinds of things. And there are real differences between all of the parties, and their platforms express that. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and if it has, please make sure that you hit the like button, or send me a comment. You can email me at bob@bunkerbob.com. I'd love to hear from you and answer any emails that I can. So I hope to see you next time as we continue to look at the differences between political platforms. I hope that you have a blessed day. We will see you next time.